Sponsorships. What exactly is a sponsorship? A sponsorship can be anywhere from McDonald's paying you $10,000 to chew on a Big Mac and tell them, oh my God, this Big Mac is awesome, all the way down to a small business that will pay you $1,500 for 30 seconds of you saying, hey, go check out this business. You don't need millions of downloads to monetize your podcast. Here's how small podcasters are making big money. Podcasts are blowing up right now. And it's not just because people love listening. It's because they're a powerful way to build a loyal audience, and it's a serious business. Whether you're looking to grow your brand or create a new income source, there is so much opportunity here. In this video, I am going to walk you through exactly how to start your podcast and turn it into something profitable, from planning, promotion, to monetization strategies, even if you're starting out with 0 listeners. Before you can bring in the cash, you have to think about who your podcast is actually for. In business terms, this will be called defining your niche and your target audience. So, who is your target audience? Before you can think about getting those big bucks, does the audience that you're thinking of speaking to actually have revenue to pay you? But if you're targeting an audience that doesn't necessarily have cash in their pockets, then are there organizations that will support this mission? I.e., let's say you want to create a podcast for homeless youth, and you want homeless youth to find your podcast and listen to it regularly to get them out of their situation. Well, there are organizations and nonprofits like trusts that will write a grant and allow you to record this podcast weekly and put out something that will actually help this audience. But the first thing you need to do is think about who your podcast is for. When I started my podcast, I knew that I wanted to create a podcast that would bring in coaching clients. So the audience for my podcast were people who had a 9-to-5 and they wanted to change their life. So every single time I had an episode and every guest that I had on my couch, my questions were targeting my audience. So it really makes it easy for you to have a money conversation on the back end if you get really clear on who your target audience is. And my next question, if they haven't really said who their podcast is for, is going to be, now, what's the format going to be? I have a bias towards interview podcasts. Maybe not even just interview podcasts, but podcasts that allow you to bring on guests. Because one, the more people you have on, the more dynamic the conversations are. And I personally am not just one who likes to talk to the camera, even though I'm doing it right now. But if you want to start a podcast and you don't necessarily want to just be the only one on your show, you can consider an interview podcast or something like a round table. You can even just bring on guests to have a conversation about topics that you are already thinking about. So it still has that solo feel, but you bring on guest speakers to talk about that topic with you. The type of format you choose really depends on your goals. So back to your mission. Are you starting a podcast to enlighten your audience on facts and research based on the industry? Or are you sharing your best practices with your particular audience so they can get to know you and learn how you can help them solve their problems? And if it's not one of those, if you're just entertaining, perhaps a different format, like not a round table or an interview, but something that's more solo, allowing you to just talk with your audience in their ear and get to know them personally. Choosing the format really depends on what goal are you accomplishing and then who your audience is. Then after you decide what your format is, deciding the length. Now, when we were in COVID days, podcasts started to get way longer. That's when you started to see Joe Rogan with his 3-hour long podcast. But before that, that really wasn't a thing. So you don't have to feel forced to create these 3-hour long podcasts just because that's what people are doing these days. If you want to create a 15-minute podcast where people get exactly what they need in a small bite-sized chunk of information, then by all means, you should create a short podcast. As a matter of fact, people who have busy schedules, if that's your audience, they appreciate those 15-minute bite-sized chunks of podcasts. So think about your audience and then decide what format and length of podcast you want to create. The biggest part of podcasting that everybody talks about but doesn't necessarily bring in the most cash. As a matter of fact, it takes out the most cash. It's a drainer if you try to make this the biggest part of your podcast. it's equipment and gear. So your technological setup depends on who you are. If you're already a videographer and you have a whole setup and studio at your house, then by all means use that. But if you are like me, when I started my podcast, I had zero tech savvy, and I had an I don't even know what kind of Android I had back then, but it was an Android nonetheless, and I still have an Android, and I will fight you if you tell me I need to get an iPhone. But if you're thinking about starting your podcast with the least amount of friction, I started my podcast with a smartphone, and I had a connectable lapel mic. So all you had to do, like literally all I had to do was stick my microphone in the camera, set it across from me so that it was outside of the range of the camera, and record myself and my guests with the exact same microphone. And the episode did really well. You can still check it out on my YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, or the very first episode that I did with a guest. So the minimum viable equipment that you are going to need is a phone, if you have one, which would be your camera, and a simple microphone that will help you clarify the audio. Now, even if you don't have a microphone and all you have is your cell phone and you want to get started today, there are apps that will allow you to master the audio for absolutely free. You can use Adobe Podcast and it will master 1 hour of podcast for absolutely free. So don't try to overthink this thing. If you're doing this virtually and your first guest is actually on your computer, then you might need headphones. But again, the headphones don't even matter. Right now, I have on wireless headphone in my ear, but you can also use earbuds that go over your ear, if that's what you choose. A lot of podcasters have that as well. It really does well for the look and feel. So I have some headphones that go over my ear as well when I'm doing virtual podcasts. So I will link all of this equipment in the bottom if this is what you want to use for your podcast. But like I said, if you just want to get started with the bare minimum, all you need is your phone and perhaps the lapel mic, which I will put in the link below. Really intricate, but I will tell you this. The hosting platform that you should choose really is based on the people in your community. Some people like Riverside, some people like Anchor, and me personally, I like Red Circle. The reason why I chose Red Circle is because one, my mentor was using it at the time, so it really made it easy if I had any questions to just reach out to someone instead of using the help forums, which I'm really not a customer service type chick. I don't like calling customer service and getting AI people, even though I'm learning more about AI. And I don't like to have this like rigmarole of customer service conversations. So if I can just go to somebody I know and ask them a quick question, if it's not on YouTube, then that's the reason why I chose Red Circle. So on top of knowing people who use Red Circle in my own community, it also has all the analytics that I need. If you haven't noticed, I haven't said paying for anything is required. I literally monetize my podcast with all of the free elements of these platforms that I'm about to share. So you can too. Don't overthink it. Choose a platform that works for you and then launch your podcast. If you want me to record a video specifically comparing the different podcast platforms, and that's something that you really want to know before you get started, then drop a comment below and I will absolutely compare and contrast for you. Some platforms do more analytics than others, and then some platforms help you out with distribution more than others. So if that is something that you want me to do a video on, then comment below and I absolutely will. Now, if you're new to podcasting and you haven't yet got your feet wet yet, then I will be the first person to tell you consistency is the name of the game when it comes to podcasting. A lot of people start podcasts and they quit. Some people even record podcasts and they never launch an episode. The worst thing that I've ever heard someone tell me is that they were the guest on someone's podcast and that person never released their episode. And that's because your workflow can be too convoluted. You probably don't have a clear idea of what you want to do with your podcast, or maybe you just don't even know what parts to connect to actually launch it. All you did was record it and you said, I'll figure it out, but you never did. Don't create a bad rep with people coming to your podcast, number one. But number two, if you've committed to podcasting this year, then the best thing that I can tell you to help with your consistency is to record 3 to 5 episodes of your podcast so that you can get some momentum. By recording these podcasts in advance, one, you can set them to release on time, And then two, when you continue recording episodes, you'll have 3 and 4 episodes batched up so that your listeners can binge listen and then wait for new episodes from you. So what I would say is record 3 to 5 episodes, put 2 or 3 of them up in the beginning when you first launch your podcast, and then you already have created runway for yourself to now start releasing weekly episodes that trail after those. This is actually a cheat code for people who are starting out but don't have any monetization yet. If you record 3 to 5 episodes and then you launch all 3, and let's say you want to schedule the next 2 to release, this can now give you the leverage to have conversations with people who could sponsor your podcast by saying, hey, I'm starting something out new, but if you will check out my content, you'll see that this is the body of work that I intend to put out. If you're behind this mission, then I invite you to invest in the journey. You can do this with 3 podcasts on your platform or 0 podcasts, depending on the relationships that you've built in your life. You need to have 3 to 5 episodes definitely recorded, but you can consider whether or not you need to release those in order to have these monetization conversations. Here's what I don't recommend you do. When I started my podcast, I was so eager to podcast that I just started inviting everybody to interview. So by signing up all of these different guests, I started recording and I ended up with 15 episodes before I launched my first one. Even though it sounds cool, what that did was put me on this really huge runway of a whole bunch of episodes that I didn't know what I was going to do with. And eventually I just had too many batch recordings that was going to take at least a year for me to record if I was going to release an episode once a week. So it's okay to have 3 or 4 episodes in the chamber. That could even give you a month off for you to just kind of chill. But I don't recommend you having 15 batch recordings that you don't necessarily know what you want to do because 1, you haven't chosen your niche. 2, you haven't chosen your mission. So now you're sitting here with a whole bunch of content that you don't necessarily want to do anything with, but you feel indebted to the people that you've created them for or with. So now you just start putting things out there that don't necessarily add to the brand. I think I said everything I need to say about planning your episodes ahead of time and the ways that you can actually monetize whether you do or do not have pre-planned episodes. So this should be all you need to start monetizing your episodes. Understanding your why and your mission behind this podcast should probably be the first thing that you do. Before you even think about who the podcast is for, think about why this podcast needs to be created. I know in the podcasting space, everyone has this saying that your voice needs to be heard. And I don't disagree with that. But what are you here to say? If you haven't established a mission, then you might need to take a moment to think about why you want to put out a podcast. It can even be based on your own personal development. You can very well say, I'm starting a podcast to develop my speaking skills. So now your podcast is in the speaking industry, which you can still monetize on. But if you don't have a why or any reason, it's going to be hard to have those monetization conversations because your sponsors are going to want to know what's behind your podcast. Your listeners are going to know why are they either donating or buying your merchandise. And then your guests are going to need to know why exactly are they coming on the show outside of just for their own public exposure, but also how can they benefit your audience. Knowing your why is of the utmost importance. So take a moment, sit down and write down why you want to start a podcast in the first place. It will make monetization way easier down the line when you have this answer figured out. All of these questions you need to ask yourself before you even start your podcast. All you need to do is write these questions down, answer them for yourself, and then you'll be ready to start your podcast. Now, if you want these questions laid out in the PDF for you so that you can literally answer these questions, and I have a couple ChatGPT prompts that you can use to help you brainstorm as well, then click the link below and I will share that resource with you so you can go ahead and start monetizing the day you launch your podcast. Now, I told you I started my podcast with my cell phone. So I am not going to overcomplicate this video. If you're using one camera, then all you need to do is set up your camera. Let's say you have a guest. I'm going to talk about it as if I have a guest. You're going to You can set your camera up in between you and your guests so that it captures both of you guys. But make sure it's not too high because you'll have way too much headspace, especially if you cut off the bottom parts. So you want to have a good balance between a little headspace over your head and then also maybe record down to the knees so that you can have some space to edit and go in and out in post-production. So you probably see your favorite influencers with like multiple camera views. Now, this is a really cool tip. If you don't have multiple cameras, then all you need to do is record a wide enough setting. And you'll get this over time, but create a wide enough setting, a little space to the side of your guest, a little space to the side of you, and then don't forget your headspace and then the spot below. That way, when you're in post-production, you can actually zoom in to a portion of the screen in the same 16:9 format and then zoom out to back to the two of your guests to make it look like you have two separate angles, really three separate angles. There's one for your guests, one for you, and then one that's of the both of you guys. So you don't need multiple cameras in order to create a quality show. All you need to do is have enough space between you and your camera so that you can edit in post-production. It makes it so much easier for you to get a clean look. Whether you have returning listeners or people are new to your platforms, it really takes a lot to capture folks' attention. You're going to need to create an irresistible hook in the beginning to keep people listening to your episode. You might even want to let them know what to expect so that they can stick around so they can get the best part of your episode. So you can start your podcast with a preview of the episode, like the most juicy part of the conversation, or you can start it off with an introduction of yourself, asking a really good thought-provoking question so that they can listen to the episode and come up with their thoughts on what they think. You can also create a really catchy montage or just like a jingle that gets people going throughout the whole podcast episode, because if that's the energy that you want to bring to your show, then your intro can really get them engaged and into a state already emotionally where they can listen to your podcast and really ride along with you, whether they're in their car, doing laundry, or just sitting down watching you. Nobody is going to tell you this. In order to have really good momentum when you launch your podcast, something that will take your podcast to the next level, whatever that level is, to already have built community. If you haven't already built a community or you don't belong to a community, that's okay. But if you do belong to a community, tell them what you're working on. Tell them that you started a podcast and what it's about. And if this community is already centered around that topic, they are going to want to listen just to support you. In the beginning, support is all that matters. Whether you get donations from your listeners, whether you have your community listen to your episodes and that increases your downloads and views, or you simply get hooked listeners who are going to be along the journey from the very beginning simply because they were part of your community from the jump. That's the most overrated podcast tip I could possibly tell you. If you don't know that there are millions of podcasts that exist and nobody listens to them, it's because they haven't told anyone about them and they do not belong to a community. Which makes it even harder for you to monetize your podcast because no one is listening. So I can't lie to you. In order to monetize your podcast, you have to have listeners. There's no way you can have a podcast that makes money that no one listens to. So if you want to get momentum, then reach out to the people who already are a part of your community, not just your family and friends, but real, true acquaintances and people who actually are part of the communities that you're in, and tell them that you have created something that will help this audience and that they should get behind you to support. I promise you, if you do it right now and you have a couple episodes already launched and just drop your link in the chat regularly in a Facebook group or in like a Zoom meeting that you're in, you are absolutely going to get some dedicated listeners in the beginning. Now, when you launch your podcast episodes, the work is not over. Actually, the work has just begun. Until you get to a point where your podcasts are rolling on a regular schedule, you have to do a lot of promotion in the beginning in order to get more eyeballs on your podcast so that your listeners can now know when to expect you. Once you've gotten a rhythm of content, there will be times where you can take weeks and even months off, and people are still listening to your episodes without you doing extremely a lot of promotion. You can absolutely get people engaged and keep them hooked in the beginning with great promotion efforts that will last on the back end to come. You can build up so much momentum in one season of promoting that will last you the rest of the year. So, how should you promote? I have videos on my page, and I'll link them in here, somewhere around here, that will show you how to promote your podcast on social media. So, what I will say is you need to create a network of promotion. So, have your social media content already pre planned out. Plan out, I would say, a one episode a week while you're getting started. And then you want to post clips of that episode throughout all of the platforms that you can actually manage. And then let everyone know that you're going live about the podcast, whether you're with a guest or if it's by yourself. Now, why do I say you need to go live? When you've pre-recorded content, sometimes the content can get stale. So one, to revive that content, and if it's with a guest, to revive that energy you have with the guest, you can actually go live so that you can now let your audience know that the episode is live. You can catch up with your guests, and you can give any Q&A that you want to give about the topic that you've talked about. Going live is like a cheat code for me, so I would just tell you, if you're not going live about your episodes and you really want to increase your views, increase your exposure, and then bring new listeners onto the table, then going live on your new episodes is definitely something I would suggest. Now, outside of social media promotion, you should be building an email list from day one. There should be a link in your description, both on all audio platforms and in your YouTube, that says, "Hey guys, if you want to be along the journey with me, then give me your email so that we can stay connected." You can create a regular newsletter or a blog, or you can just send out periodic marketing emails that lets them know, "Hey, I've created new products and services," or, "Hey, here, check out this new video because I just created it and this is why you would like it." Segmenting your audience based on the interests or the types of topics that you talk about on your podcast is going to be really helpful for you to be able to not necessarily mass email, but segment your email blast to those who actually said that they're interested in a specific topic. I want to take this section a little bit slower so that you really understand how easy it is for you to get to big bucks on your podcast. So let's take it step by step. Sponsorships. What exactly is a sponsorship? A sponsorship can be anywhere from McDonald's paying you $10,000 to chew on a Big Mac and tell them, "Oh my God, this Big Mac is awesome," all the way down to a small business that will pay you $1,500 for 30 seconds of you saying, "Hey, go check out this business." There is a huge range of the types of sponsorships that you can have on your podcast. So don't feel like you have to spend all of your time chasing after big fish when you can look at these small businesses and even local businesses that have marketing budgets and they will pay you for ads in your podcast. You can also have clothing sponsorships. Now, there are a couple episodes where you see me promoting different brands on my podcast, and that's because they said, if you will wear these particular clothes, I will get exposure for my brand and then I will get sales to that product. So one, I'm sponsoring their clothing, but then two, I'm using my links to their websites or to particular products so that people can click the links in my bio and then go purchase the t-shirt that I'm wearing or the candle that I'm talking about or the teas that we're promoting. All of these things that you're talking about on your podcast can have direct correlation to your wallet. So don't just think about sponsorships again from the big fish. Think about small businesses, clothing brands, makeup brands that you could just get their products, try them out for free, and become an affiliate for people on your podcast. Which brings me to affiliate income. There are different ways that you can capture affiliate income. We've talked about one, which is basically me talking about a product, linking it in the description, and then you go in and purchase it. You also have Amazon affiliate. So there's two ways for you to actually get that. You can be a part of their influencer program or become a part of Amazon Associates, which doesn't require you to have a follower limit or any of that. You can click on a link and Amazon will pay you a commission based on the products that people buy. The next one is using other websites like Digistore 24 that will literally give you an array of products that you can actually select and promote them in individual episodes that you have. And then you can link the product below in your description so that people can purchase that product from you. Digistore works very similar to Amazon, except you can also find courses from independent course creators that offer a range of affiliate commission. Which brings me to the last type of affiliate deal that you can have on your podcast, and this will bring in so much cash if you do it right. Course creation has gone crazy since Corona, and there are so many really good courses and course creators that you can have on your podcast so that your audience knows how they can benefit from the guests that you have on your episode. Now, you can create your own product. Of course, having your own product and service is a great way to monetize your podcast. But if your guest comes onto the podcast and they already have a course or a product or a service and they can create an affiliate link for you, then just by having them on your podcast, asking them about their product or service, and then directing your audience to your guest's website, you'll get a commission based on every time someone buys a product. So I absolutely think this is the most no-brainer way of getting an affiliate deal, just by inviting someone who brings value to your podcast and then earning a commission anytime someone actually purchases a course. So think about it. I've seen courses from $40 all the way to $40,000. So depending on the type of guests you have access to, you can tap into affiliate income, which is 10 or 15% of those sales that would absolutely benefit your bottom line. As I mentioned, I started my podcast to bring in coaching clients. So the coolest thing about having a podcast, especially if you are a coach yourself, is you get to share your framework, your experiences, and give your clients a sense of how you actually talk and what you talk about and how it might be working with you simply by having your podcast and coming out consistently with episodes. So I will never forget, I actually had a client. I remember being on a weekly coaching call with this person. So we had gotten all the way down to just weekly coaching. And this is when he said, I remembered I listened to X, Y, and Z episode of yours, and I knew you were going to be my coach. It was mind blowing because one, I hadn't been asking for feedback up until that point, which let me know I need to be asking my listeners, am I on the right track? Are they also getting value from this? Because hearing my client actually tell me that they found me through my podcast was all the confirmation I needed to know that I should keep doing that same revenue generating activity. So if you have your own business and you're thinking about how is this podcast going to bring me cash, it absolutely will bring in clients on your behalf if you talk about your frameworks and the things that really matter about your services. Now, before I ever got a client, before I got an affiliate income, before I ever got a sponsorship, I got donations. You can absolutely solicit donations because one, you have a mission. It's very clear on who your niche is. And three, it should be easier and easier and easier for you to communicate that with your audience. And then follow up with, if you want to donate to this mission, then you can donate here. Here should be the link in your bio. That is how you can easily monetize your podcast, simply by getting people behind the mission. The better you communicate your mission, the easier it will be to get those donations on the back end. And this is without creating a product, service, or inviting a guest to your podcast, especially if you like to have solo podcast episodes. So after you've gotten all of these different steps knocked out, you've planned out your podcast, you've launched your podcast, and you're even promoting your podcast, you have to sit back and performance. See which episodes did well, see which episodes didn't do well. And then the ones that did, analyze what actually worked. Ask your audience, why did they like that episode? And ask them, what episodes would they like to hear more of? So that you're not just putting out episodes without really getting any audience feedback. Like I said, I didn't even realize I was getting clients from my episodes until I actually got that feedback in a coaching session. So don't be like me. Take some time and analyze your episodes. See what's working and what's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be the downloads, but it can also, probably most importantly, be your watch time. Are people actually listening all the way through? It's easier to just look at that on YouTube, but there are analytics and tools that you can use on different hosting platforms. Like I said, you have to pay once you get to a certain level. but you can absolutely see which episodes are people sticking through that helps you know what content to create going forward. Now that makes it so much easier when you're having sponsorship conversations and partnership conversations to say, this is what's working, these are my numbers, are you willing to get behind me? And we've already talked about making money before you got started. So if you've already taken action and started monetizing before you build up a huge portfolio, imagine how much easier it's going to be when you actually have a portfolio and numbers to share to potential sponsors or ads or partnerships. Once I started to actually get numbers on my podcast, I created a quick pitch deck that I could email easily so that people can see what my downloads were, how many views that I have, how many clicks, all of the information. I'll actually put the link to the free PDF below so that you can download the template, switch out your logo, and put your numbers in there. So it makes it very easy for you to have a conversation with people about supporting your podcast from that angle. Or you can also tell people, this is the audience that I'm bringing in. You can put your demographics in there, and things that would be really important for your sponsors to know so that they know you have their audience. All right, that's a lot of information. I hope it was helpful for you to take action, start your podcast, and start monetizing from day one. And if you already have a body of work already created, it'll be really easy for you to blow through these steps and start monetizing your podcast today. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, or if you're like, I'm not getting it, can you clarify that point? Put it in the description below. What phase in your podcast process are you? And then how can I help you on your journey so that if you are not even if you haven't produced any episodes, I can help you with creating your podcast. Or if you already created a body of work, I can help you with monetizing that podcast as well. Until next time, I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching.